family African American, people of color. Well, after I left the detective's office, I made my way to the funeral home with my older sister, who elected not to go into the room that I entered where I had to view Jennifer's body. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. When I saw my sister's body on the slab there at the funeral home. And as I walked toward her, I began to see more and more as I drew closer what happens when another human being decides to take the life of another human being, in this case, with a handgun. And all at once it hit me that so many people have these idolatrous, romantic affairs with guns, weapons of neighborhood destruction. But I bet many of them have never seen what a bullet does to a body. It does to the head, the torso. They've never seen that. I saw it. And I cannot ever unsee it. What another human being decided to do to another human being. And much as I was frozen by those moments there, I knew I couldn't stay there because we had things to do as a family. My sister, who is also ordained clergy, we had to talk about Jennifer's funeral service and collect her belongings from the house. We had to be concerned about her daughter, little Imani, what she saw in the house. Who would care for her? Oh yes, we were grieving mightily Jennifer's murder. Yet we couldn't stay locked in that moment of time because we had things to do. Concerns awaited us. Food. Who would buy food for little Imani? Who would buy diapers for her? Who would provide counseling for our family? Mental health counseling. Where would Imani go? Who would take her in and raise her? Expenses along those lines. Paying for the funeral. All those were on our minds. And they consumed us. And in the midst of all that, though, we still took time to remember Jennifer. I kept thinking, I was just 15 years older than Jennifer. I recall when my mother and stepfather said they were having a baby. Jennifer came into the world. And I knew her as she grew as this funny, quirky girl, then young woman. Made some mistakes in her life. She was overcoming them. She was finding more about who she was at the time of her death. And I felt so horrified that she didn't get an opportunity to fully unfold, fully evolve, fully develop. Oh, we were grieving her loss as we had to deal with so much at the time. Food, shelter. The mortgage had to be paid, Diapers for little Imani. Again, mental health counseling. We all needed that. The burial expenses. Clothing. And the list could go on and on. Well, ultimately, my grandfather wrote a check for the $8,000 funeral expense. But around that time, though, before he started to do that, I wrote to the State of Ohio Victims Assistance Office, and I explained what happened to Jennifer, and our family was in shock, and asking what this office could do for our family. I received, back in the mail, a nice form letter. It was personalized at the top with my name. It said, "We received your letter and regret your loss, and we'll get back to you." That was 1997. I still have not heard back from the Ohio Victims Assistance Office. But I would believe that between 1997 and even now, according to my feeble math skills, about $17 million were spent in Ohio alone on the matrix and the machinery of state-sponsored death, where other human beings decide to take the life of other human beings, this time in the so-called name of justice. About $17 million. And I began to think, I don't know how many families in Ohio were like mine who lost loved ones to murder, but I would believe there were probably dozens over that span of time. And you multiply the expenses that those families incurred. Because sometimes the breadwinner was the one who was murdered. The mortgage provider, the rent payer, and so on and so forth. If you just calculate those expenses, you know that they were quite pricey. And I started thinking, what would have happened if the state of Ohio, rather than spending $17-some odd million on, again, that matrix and machinery of state-sponsored homicide, what would have happened if the state had invested those funds into the lives of families like mine, who had real and glaring, visible and obvious needs, none of which could ever have been addressed by a state-sponsored homicide of those convicted of the homicide of our loved ones.
Amen.
Not one of our needs could be met by state-sponsored death. We all, in our own ways, believed that nothing good could come out of executing people convicted of murdering our loved ones. Nothing good concerning our well-being as families. For the death penalty and executions provide no hope for us, provide no healing for us, don't assist us in grieving. Executions don't help us with restoration, and they definitely don't help with closure. There is no closure for murder victim families. The best we can hope for is restoration, to pick up the pieces and somehow go on with our lives. $17 million. I'm not sure what your state spends here in South Carolina, but I would imagine it's upward to the same range of Ohio since 1997. How many co-victims like my family could have benefited from those monies invested in our lives? Well, as I moved forward, years had passed. I never really quite had language to describe what I was feeling, what my family had undergone. But I knew the death penalty was wrong. It was wrong for several reasons. But I went to a death penalty protest rally in front of the United States Supreme Court. And it was there I met a man named Bill Pelkey. And I learned that he was the co-founder of an organization called Journey of Hope, From Violence to Healing. And that organization was comprised largely of people like me who had lost loved ones to murder. And there were folks also who had loved ones on death row, or folks who had been exonerated from death row, who were all working together to say with one voice, executions are wrong. And then the co-victims like me, we were able to say through Journey of Hope with one voice to the state, don't kill in our name.
Amen.
Don't kill in our name. For executions are hollow instruments of death that offer no hope, no healing, no redemption, no restoration, no closure. They just continue the vicious and horrific cycle of death that claimed our loved ones. We believe that whether a homicide is carried out on a Cleveland city street or in a prison as sanctioned by the state, homicide is wrong.
That's right.
Homicide to show that homicide is abhorrent, is itself abhorrent and wrong. I'm a preacher and a Christian preacher, I may say, and I believe in the power of God to transform human lives, even the lives of people who have hurt us and angered us the most. For the Bible story has stories of folks who were murderers who were transformed. We all remember Moses being a murderer, David, murderer, Paul, the artist formerly known as Saul, I call him, a murderer. Each one, they were collectively murderous men that God transformed into movement men for the sake of hope, for the sake of redemption, for the sake of salvation, for the sake of wholeness. That same God is still able to transform lives even now of those who have hurt us and angered us the most. And one thing that I always point out is that we co-victims, we are not anti-accountability. We're just anti-murder, anti-homicide.
That's right.
Because we understand clearly that sometimes shortcuts are taken, evidence is withheld, lies have been accepted as truth, and the wrong people have been convicted and sometimes killed in the name of justice. We're not anti-accountability. We want the right people held accountable, transparently held accountable. But we don't want them killed in the name of justice. Don't kill in our names, is what we say. So I'm privileged to travel this world with Journey of Hope folks. Folks from Witness to Innocence. Folks from South Carolina for Death Penalty Alternatives, and so many other organizations, ACLU. I'm privileged to travel with folks of faith and goodwill who can say to prosecutors and judges and juries and to the public itself, executions are wrong. They're wrong for South Carolina. They're wrong for Oklahoma. They're wrong for Texas. And they're wrong for Ohio. And I can say with co-victims like myself to the state, don't kill in our names. Don't kill in our names. You can invest in love in our names. You can invest in true healing in our names. You can invest in restoration in our names. But don't kill in our names. Thank you very much.